Hi, I'm Ernie Wells. How you doing? I'll be with you in just a minute. Now, let's see. First, we'll pull in that Fruhoff. Then we'll check out the Mac and see where we go from here. You know, I've been a foreman in this shop for over 15 years. And you know what I like about it? The fact that you can come in here every day and still find something new. Oh, there's new models, new problems, new ways of fixing. And even the simplest problem can have something interesting. You take air foundation brakes, for instance. Oh, they may look easy, but there's always, I don't know, a hidden challenge, I guess. Like finding out where the problem really is. What some people call troubleshooting. Now, troubleshooting air brakes means you always got to be prepared to approach a problem systematically. It's like yesterday. This trucker I know, Bud Higgins, he drives for Watterson. He drove his truck in here. I mean, he nearly did drive right in. His brakes weren't only squealing like he was clear down to metal. They were so shot, he darn near ran right through the side of my shop. So first, I get Bud calmed down a little.
All right. Make sure it's down outside. Here. Okay, go ahead.
Then I roll under to check it out. Now, you know, most drivers know their rigs like the back of their hands. So when they bring them in, it's good to listen to what they say about where the truck's bellyache is. But it's still a safe bet to start by just looking around a little. Now, I usually begin by making sure both brake chambers are the same size, so the actuating forces are equal, which Bud's were. Then, I measure up the slack adjusters to make sure they're both the same length and at 90 degrees when the chambers are at half stroke. Now, if the slacks were less than 90 degrees, that would have meant Bud wasn't getting the required torque to the cam. But he was okay there too. And while I'm under there, I also look at the clearance between the drum and shoes to see if the brakes are adjusted right. So anyway, once I was done poking around, I put Billy, one of the other guys, on it. I had steered Bud away. He was still going on about his brush with death. You know, oh, Bud, he likes to exaggerate a little bit. You know. Then, once the wheels were off, Billy calls me back in to take a look at the shoes. Now, Billy, he's got brakes down pat, but he knows I happen to have a sort of a thing for shoes and lining. Now, it's amazing how much they can tell you about a truck if you know how to look at them. Well, as a matter of fact, I've made quite a little study of them over the years, and I'll bet I'm as good as that Sherlock Holmes fellow when it comes to deducing things from worn shoes and lining. For instance, when I see shoes with the opposite corners worn unevenly, then I know it's time to check out the anchor pins, the anchor pin holes in the shoe, the camshaft, and the cam bushings. Or, if you see that the lining has a raised lip on one edge, you've got a bent spider. That's probably from someone heating it up to try and bang out an anchor pin. Now, lining that's worn thinner on one edge, that probably means you got a bell-mouthed brake drum from the drum being too light for the application or cut too thin when it was turned. Lining worn thin toward the middle of the shoe usually means a drum that's worn oversized, except on Eaton's, where that's the normal wear pattern. On Eaton's, an oversized drum will result in most of the wear being toward the cam end. Now, if you see grease all over the place, you better check your camshaft seals to see if they're installed wrong or missing altogether. But don't confuse it with oil-soaked lining, which comes from a leaking wheel seal. And if the lining's worn thinner in the center than along the edges, your shoe table's probably gotten too weak. Now, you can check this by delining the shoe and laying a straight edge across the table to measure the gap. If it's more than 16 thousandths, the table's weakened and the shoe should be discarded. This kind of wear pattern also indicates a friction material that's not aggressive enough for the application. Now, using the right friction material on all wheels is really important. And choosing the right material for a specific application, well, that's a whole other story. For now, let's just say that with new material, it's easy to find the edge code that tells you the coefficient of friction. But when it's got bad cracks and/or is flaking, I know that someone goofed up somewhere and put the wrong kind of block on, which overworked it. Now, the real secret to a good brake job is in block-to-drum contact, so the entire surface of the block contacts the drum. And that means, to make sure you've got proper contact, you need a good drum surface and good foundation parts. So, where was I? Oh, yeah, the wrong kind of block. So, when Billy calls me over to Bud's truck, that's exactly what I saw there. Some turkey had definitely used the wrong friction material on a one-wheel brake job. The other shoes and lining were so worn, they looked like Bud had driven that truck up and down Mount Everest for the last 20 years. And obviously, he was going to need new block, which of course meant replacing it on all four wheels. Now, Bud, who, as you know, wasn't having the greatest day, wasn't too happy when I gave him that news. But if you don't use the same parts on both sides at the same time, you run into the same trouble all over again, and a lot sooner than you need to. We also found some heat checks in Bud's drums, but they weren't too bad, and we were able to clean them up with a light cut. Billy's real good about staying within tolerances. But then, when the shoes were off, we found another problem. An anchor pin was froze up so tight, it looked like we were going to be there till doomsday getting it out. Now, with replaceable anchor pins like Bud's Rockwell P's and the Rockwell Q's, you should always make sure to use the right tool to remove them. Because if you keep banging on a red-hot spider, you're going to bend it for sure. And then you'll have to replace that too. To make sure it's not bent, always check the alignment of the anchor pin holes. Now, even if the anchor pins aren't frozen, you should replace even slightly worn pins and bushings, or else they'll allow the shoe to rock. And make sure you check the anchor end of the shoes for wear. If the holes are too large, replace the shoe.